Happy Pakistan Ordinance Factory Day. If you're up in DNC and one of your guys, Moaz Mustafa, has been a key recipient of your weapons over the last couple of years, this is truly a day to celebrate. It is day 111. Connect the dots for me a little bit with Nancy Pelosi and ISI and NATO and so forth. Well, now, during the shutdown, where is she? She takes a military plane. She's been using these military planes since 2009 and before. She somehow accumulates, I think, something on the order of $100 million in personal wealth. Now, I know her husband was involved in weapons and so forth, but that's a lot of money to make after you come into office, and it begs for investigation. If Trump's hotel deal in Moscow begs for investigation by ex-MI6 agents, then that certainly begs investigation. So it's odd behavior to try to take a secret plane out into Pakistan, that area, Afghan-Pakistan area, then go on to Cairo, which is her Moaz Mustafa area, and then move on to Brussels for 6 days, which is where most of the money is being diverted, right? So, yeah, and I don't really have a problem with her, living it up and partying. If she wasn't making money on the side with pay to play, and it's going to be her husband as well, then that's really where I have the issue. So the $17,000 a day at her having a party is very minor. I say live it up, double the orders, just stop the Pakistani Ordinance Factory. That's what I say. Now let's look at a couple of the facts, right? Again, the pattern here is you always take your conspirators and then have them attack Trump. Who did the DNC enlist to attack Trump? Was it the US intelligence agencies? Well, yes, that's true. It was Brennan. It was a group inside the FBI. But really the first group that starts the attack goes all the way back to 2015, and that's this group in ex-British intelligence guys, this Cambridge spy group. Who is that group? That same group is the group that still has this idea that Churchill is the foreign minister to India, and we still own the Pakistani Ordnance Factory, and we still make weapons for all over the world. It's Rule Britannia is their idea. They carry around these 11th century swords and dub each other Knights of Ireland and Knights of Durban and Knights of, or whatever, no, Rhodesia, I guess, and that sort of thing. So that's the behavior. No, and I'm quite serious. Who do they go to? If you listen to John Solomon last night on Hannity, who do you go to connect all the dots for the dossier? It's Christopher Steele. Isn't Christopher Steele the same guy, really, for the last 20 years that have been running these dark operations all over the world? Basically recreating the crime unit that they created in New York, the C-24 crime unit, and putting it in all the major cities of the world with Oleg Deripaska compromise operations. It's almost like those, when you see Saks Fifth Avenue and it says New York, or an advertising agency, it says New York, London, Paris, Rome, in the real elite letters, elite font. That's the sort of the way that they've approached this whole partnership. The FBI has kind of partnered with these old MI6 guys, this Cambridge spy group. Again, I love all the people of London or of England and all over England. Not all over England. I've gone to England 2 or 3 times. But I love England, English history, and so forth. I just don't think Winston Churchill's idea of intervention and covert war, including chemical weapons, is the right model to be following. And there are people in our story that are graduates of Churchill College. I can't remember who it is right now, but I think Lakova is a Churchill College graduate, if I'm not mistaken. So you have these kind of, I don't know, I'm not going to call them acolytes since Churchill's dead, but I do think that there is this kind of idea that we can have a covert set of wars, and you can be the Duke of, Belfast, That's okay. John Brennan, you can move there and be the Duke of Belfast, and you can live right across from Dennis O'Brien. And they almost, the heraldry that they used to do with all the flags and trooping of the color and whatnot is come out through these soccer clubs. If you look at it, they brought back the old Middle East, middle medieval heraldry and so forth. They brought back the swords. They brought back a lot of this to our current situation. It would be fun. It would be fun. It's fun just going to the soccer games and so forth. But it's beyond fun. It covers this covert action where you have torture and illegal weapons sales and snipers and overthrows. And that's the nasty part of this. Again, remember Nancy Pelosi, when she's on the Gang of Eight, so they can take covert action and really only have to share it very sparingly with 45 members of Congress, the key members, the Democratic members. You don't even have to share it with your Republican colleagues on the 3 committees that the Awans represent the Democratic members on those committees, about 45 total, with the DHS, Foreign Affairs, and Intelligence Committee. You got Adam Schiff in this same situation. You've got Andre Carson on this plane. You've got all those people who were insiders to this pay-to-play weapons game. And again, remember when there's an emergency in early April 2016, what does Nancy Pelosi do? What's her immediate reaction? Is get Imran in here right now. Get Imran in here, because he runs the system. He does the Blackberries. He does the operational security. He does the operational security for all this Blackwater black weapons trade. So he calls, excuse me, sorry, I still have a little bit of cold. Mark is asking, Mark has done some, Mark K here has done some excellent work with on just some great research back on Mueller and Mueller's dad, how he connects. Mueller's dad turns out to be related to Bissell, going back to Connecticut through the Truesdale family. So that's just going to be some awesome stuff when you see that. So I look at Imran being the right-hand man. Again, he only gets a wrist slap for all the stuff he did wrong, obvious state support. It seems like Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan have just kind of been in this kind of agreement that this business shall be held and kept from the president. Now, Obama probably was just kind of more of a figurehead, so he wasn't probably a problem. But Trump is definitely a problem. So you have to keep stealing stuff off his desk, right? And what do we have? We have people coming out in the New York Times saying they're stealing things off his desk. Again, I hold, but we can all argue about it later, that a lot of these covert actions were dropped like chalupas in Obama's lap. We can think of Libya and not really being in the loop on that till, late. And then the same thing goes true for Syria. So it's not like we don't have an abundance of evidence where weapons are going around and covert actions are being done, right? So again, they're the key people that have the servers. Again, when you start destroying evidence, just DNC server, DCCC server, MIS department server in Chicago, the Charles Redshield server, McCain server in Arizona. You have Moaz Mustafa in Cairo with these fake emergency task forces for Libya and Syria as your key weapons ship point. You have your key guys in NATO, Bouchard and Carl Bildt, being the key money diverters of weapons money for ISAF, for the International Security Force in Afghanistan. And you've got all the Awans in Afghanistan. You've got Imran there 9 months out of the year. To me, it's the perfect triangle, weapons triangle. Again, I didn't send terabytes of information to Pakistan. I didn't send hundreds of suspicious activity reports, money to a paramilitary police force in Punjab that's been known to support LET at the border, in the border wars, in a fight with India. I saw there was 12 people recently killed there on the Kashmir border. And we know from their own promotional literature, they ship to 40 different countries. How did they ship to 40 different countries? This is a country that until recently was on the terrorist watch list. These were the people that were exporting nuclear technology. This was with the centrifuges and so forth. AQ Khan, they were exploded a bomb without the world's approval. That was a total surprise in 1998 to the world. So instead of sanctions over the next 20 years for developing a bomb, they exported the technology to Libya, North Korea, Iran, Iraq. So you would think that the Pakistani ordnance factory wouldn't necessarily be growing by leaps and bounds, but it has grown by leaps and bounds for all sorts of vehicles, not just small infantry ammunition. I'm talking about aircraft ammunition. That's NATO ammunition that they make. They also make American aircraft engine or aircraft helicopter ammunition. Again, Quds Force is shooting a lot of ammo in Benghazi, shooting a lot of ammo in Tripoli, shooting a lot of ammo in still today in Syria. And so we have just a lot of circumstantial evidence that's pointing that way. And again, we have to get to the evidence to say, what's actually going on? Are we bringing in fake employees and then they're buying a fake house and buying a fake car? The money is going back to Pakistan to buy weapons. Is that what's really happening in their terrorism? Again, we have destruction of evidence of the Blackberries, all the 4 servers I talked about. And then we have this 1, 2, 3 Dropbox that we don't know the answer to. Again, all these questions that we asked all the way back in the Awan case are going to start ringing true again with Trump. If Trump wants to take on Pelosi directly, this is how he should do it. He should say, hey, if you want to look into my background of how, we had a deal talking about the Moscow hotel, which I think ended in December of 2015, but Cohen's going to say it went on till June, then everything's fair game. If you're going to go back to a hotel that I was talking about in 2013, and Ribka, I don't like saying the word prostitute, but Ribka, the prostitute on Oleg Deripaska's yacht, is talking about how she was involved in that, and then she later recanted her testimony. But I'm sure they wanted Ribka and the other girl to take Trump down in Moscow in 2013. Again, an operation run by who? Oleg Deripaska, Andy McCabe, and Christopher Steele. So I had a chance to talk to a USAID guy last night. He's on furlough. He just started working for the chief CIO. So I was saying, hey, you make sure you check those suspicious activity reports going to Pakistan. So this is the shutdown's kind of a bonanza for me because I get to interview all these people. And just remember, Pakistan was the 4th highest USAID recipient of U.S. aid until Trump cut it off, the $3 billion. What do we know about the $87 billion for the temporary government in Iraq by the Blackwater guys? Well, the key way of building out covert operations was diverting aid, was diverting redevelopment dollars. Doesn't that make sense that Pakistan would redivert that into, if you're Pac ISI and you're getting that money and you're running the factory, when you put it into the factory versus building a road, if you build a factory with new machine tools, that means you can sell more ammunition. When you get a call from Whelan's group in this kind of old Cambridge spy ring, you can fill the order. Hey, hey, Schmitz is on the line. He needs 70. He's got the 70,000 Kalashnikovs. That's no problem. Butina's got that going at the Kalashnikov factory. But what about the 2.1 million rounds of ammunition? Ammunition's heavy. The port of Qasim, again, in our story, you learned about the port of Qasim. That is, that's very close to the UAE. And you're right in the same, kind of shipping lane there. And you're very close. They share a border. Last time I checked, in Balochistan, Iran shares a border with Pakistan, or Afghanistan. So as far as taking weapons orders especially ammo orders for the Middle East, Ordnance Factory is your man. Your go-to. And you have 45 different committee members with secure Blackberries, now with secure iPhones. When they later upgraded, Imran upgraded everybody to iPhones. He upgraded 150 people, not just 40 people, 45 people. But you have the encrypted phone. Don't we have a Navy cryptologist? Isn't that kind of interesting? That Tanae Taggart, Navy cryptologist, living at the house. Don't we? CIA guy Andre Taggart living at the house. I don't know. Sounds like an order desk to me, but maybe I'm wrong. Actually, I have a Taggart going at that house back to 2009. So I, the very first minute I saw Taggart, I knew that fact. So I was kind of going in loaded with the fact, but I let the story go because I wanted him to talk, right? I can't say, hey, by the way, I have you in this house in 2009. That would have been a little bit awkward, challenging him right then. And he came out, he did the story. So he still could be the good guy, and Imran still could be the rogue for Nancy Pelosi. But it does kind of sound like an order desk over there. You got people coming and going, Rayo Abbas coming and going. You've got, that's what Andre said, 2 people coming and going in and out of that house at Hawkshead. Were those thumb drives coming in and out? They were supposedly playing video games. Okay. Let's switch gears really quick. So Mark's talking about this. Mark is talking about, and I see Andrea Shea King talking about SpaceX, but Mark's talking about this Mueller company that he's with. And the reason why we're going back to Mueller's father again is if you can, it's a form of network analysis. If you believe that this kind of covert weapons business, or if you look at the nuclear business, it's just at the highest end weapons supply chain, if you will. You've got all the conventional arms, and then you've got, and then along came tanks, right? And in World War I, and then airplanes really weren't much of a factor in World War I, but in World War II, you've got airplanes, and then satellites, after the Cold War. And then these are higher and higher level food chain, weapons supply chains. And then until finally, you've got, nuclear missiles, nuclear submarines, and satellites and so forth. So if you look at the network of the people who ran the covert action for the lower supply chains, sometimes it'll inform you all the way through today. And Mueller certainly seems to be a part of this. If you were with us where we went to Bowie State, I had to talk to somebody who was graduating from Bowie State 5 years ago. I've talked to a lot of people that went to Bowie State here in Maryland, and I said, hey, do you know you got a cryptography school over there at the Math and Science Center that they're trying to put people into NSA? Well, that's where Bissell was. And Bissell was using DARPA. And Mark's done a lot of work on kind of what Task Force was working on, saying that there's this little group of people who were in that weapons supply chain for missiles and aircraft, and satellites with this Bissell. Bissell comes up with the U-2 spy plane. He comes up with this thing called the Corona satellite, which is what they called it. Turned out to be this thing called Keyhole 4. There was Keyhole 1, KH1, there was KH2, Keyhole 2, KH3, and then KH4. It was the first kind of satellite, was the kind of the size of a bus, sent into orbit, and then it would throw out the film. It would go around the world and take all this film, and then they would go fish the film out of the, after they were done taking it. Well, that was Bissell. And a lot of this money was spent at DARPA. Doesn't that sound a lot like the money that's being spent over with what Andrea Shea King's talking about with SpaceX and so forth? Doesn't it sound like SpaceX is space exfiltration, space technology exfiltration to private companies? Isn't that what SpaceX even in their name say? And if you look at the Saturn V rocket with the F-1A and the F-1B, isn't that what happened? Didn't it go to Energomash, which is going to be one of Oleg Deripaska and Vixel Vexelberg's company with Rostec? Okay, Cheryl's posting something. So I'm just drawing the analogy here and saying, where was Bob Mueller in all this period of time? Now it's interesting because he goes to Princeton, and he's at Princeton before the war, and then he has this relationship with the Bissell family. And these are kind of all the Yale kids, the Yale Railroad kids. I don't mean to say railroad like they played with trains, but these are all the Harriman. Harriman was the guy who, built the train through Oregon and all these out west, all the mining and the train industry, the train transportation and industry was very key in the mining, coal, oil business. Today, still, if you on the Columbia River, you can see Warren Buffett's oil trains, right? So the folks, the Yale folks, if you go back to Harriman and so forth, become part of this Brown Brothers Harriman. And they're early in on the intelligence of, hey, where's the molybdenum, to get that for the German, cannons, for a lining for the German cannons. So I'm just saying that this is the group that Bissell's in, this kind of select rare group. This is the same place, Hartford, Connecticut, that our heroes from, McDuff. So I'm not saying everybody from there is bad. I'm saying you have the heroes are from there in our story, and they're actually like within a few blocks of each other. McDuff lives in Hartford, just down the street from Bissell. But now we find, out of all the people Mueller's father could be related to, we find that he's related to Bissell in our story. That Bissell used Bowie State there for DARPA to come up with a lot of the stuff that ends up going into United Technologies, using DARPA and free research to then exfiltrate this stuff and SpaceX this stuff, I guess. And then now Mark's talking about Geis, who he also knows. Geis is this head of the Atomic Energy Commission. And if you look at the whole development of the nuclear navy, it seems like let's develop this stuff as quickly as we can. Let's replicate it. Rickover's replicating it in Canada during the key development periods. And then you have all these Navy intel people that are kind of running the show, like in exactly the same way they ran the Manhattan Project in terms of secrecy, right? Of course, this is going to be the nuclear deterrent. You don't want the Russians getting it. But somehow the Russians seemingly get every day's latest memo. And that's the biggest frustration in the nuclear Navy and Rickover is, how do the Russians have everything? Well, again, if you look at Bob Mueller, when he finally, this current guy taking down the president, again, conspirators, the attackers are usually the conspirators. The first thing he does is decommission a few nuclear power plants with this guy Geis, who is Jeff Bezos' grandfather. Takes down Rocky Flats, and he takes down this thing called Fernald, right? Near where I went to Miami University, near Cincinnati, Ohio. So it's just one of those odd kind of, he goes into precious metals, this Tugwell Mueller metals. What do we know about the nuclear Navy? That they created 3 new metals industries, created zirconium, they created beryllium, they created hafnium. Somebody has to go get that stuff. You have to create a market and say, hey, I'm a buyer of precious metals. You have to create a market in New York and send out the signal so people can bring it. So he's saying, Geis was also very involved in DARPA. The whole development of this keyhole satellite, the bus satellite from Lockheed, all DARPA. Giza used DARPA for all their stuff that they did. And then the idea is externalize the research cost and then exfiltrate the final product and then gain, take the profits for yourself. So anyway, I just thought those were interesting things, and I'll get back to those in a little bit. But there is this connection between Bissell in our story and Mueller's father. And then Mueller has these 30 years at DuPont that just seem to kind of be a mystery, right? We know all about Trump's dad. We don't know anything about Mueller's dad. We know Mueller's dad may have spent time in Argentina developing their nuclear industry. So there's a lot of stuff there that is interesting. So we talked about Pelosi. We talked about ISI, Happy Day 111, ISI. Suspicious activity reports, hundreds of payments going to Pakistan. We talked about destroyed hard drives, destroyed servers, destroyed Blackberries. We talked about terabytes to Pakistan. We talked about all the USAID that went to Pakistan. And the fact that she, right now, during the shutdown, during one of the most critical periods of her speakership since she's become speaker, where is she? She's meeting with Carl Bildt right now, right? She's meeting with Bouchard. She's meeting with Rasmussen. She's meeting with all the old pros of the Libyan investigation. She's making sure all this stuff is erased. Plus, there has to be a new system that they put in place, a more covert system to do these covert actions around the world. And that is going to be, I believe, Vostok. Why? Because all of her previous partners, look at her partners, Ukraine, Oleg Deripaska, Viktor Pinchuk, Prokhorov, all these names that, you know, keep coming back. Where are they all banking? Manafort, Kilimnik, they're all banking at the Bank of Cyprus. Where is the island next to it as the small island leads the world in cryptocurrency and crypto contracting? Malta isn't just the biggest player in the Mediterranean, they're the biggest player in Europe. Malta leads the world in this technology. And Vostok, again, coming from the same Russia joint venture with the DNC, leads the world, and that's where the business is going. So we're trying to help Trump say, look, hey, Nancy, if you want to take me on, here are talking points. We're providing talking points for the debate. And it's much better rather than Chief Blackwater. You know, you saw Chief Blackwater out there yesterday banging the, potato masher hand grenade. And I realized Chief Blackwater, you know, with the kid with the MAGA hat, I realized Chief Blackwater was trying to say, where's all the wampum gone? And I almost heard JK coming up on the back with, where has all the wampum gone? Gone, gone, Pakistan Ordinance Factory. Where has all the wampum gone? Gone, gone away, NATO. You know, I could see that coming very quickly. And I was trying to call JK, don't go down there, don't mess with Chief Blackwater. He wants to know where the wampum's gone. But you can see the frustration in Chief Blackwater's face with the MAGA kid. He's looking at the wrong kid. The 15-year-old from Kentucky doesn't have the answer of where the wampum's gone, right? The wampum went to the person who's responsible is just up on the other end of the Washington Mall, and that gal's name is Nancy Pelosi, and the other person who knows the answer is Adam Schiff. So you have to have Chief Blackwater turn around and walk the other way and go up to the Capitol. It has nothing to do with the Lincoln Memorial. Okay, it may be a lot of Lincolns, but it may be a lot of Benjamins too that a wampum is gone, right? So but we do have, it is nice for these people to come to Washington, D.C. and create these memes. Chief Blackwater is very much appreciated because, you know, we did have the Blackfeet Indians. Was there a Blackwater Indian? But now we have a symbol. It's almost like better. When I grew up in Cleveland, we had Chief Wahoo. I think we still have Chief Wahoo. They may have taken it down. And then, of course, in Atlanta, they had Chief Nakahoma. And as I said, I tweeted out this morning, I was afraid. I'm afraid now for my life going to Capitol Hill because I think people with $500,000 a year Harvard professorship endowments that are 1,024th Cherokee are going to come out thinking I'm white, and they don't realize I'm an 8th Cherokee, and so they're going to, you know, hit me with the wampum potato masher. And I fear for my life for people like, you know, if you get enough Elizabeth Warrens on the warpath, it's not only a lot of wampum gone to Pakistani Ordinance Factory, but they're dangerous. They're a dangerous element. Get them in a group. Okay, I won't go any further. Oh, Chief Wahoo's not on the uniforms for the first time this year for the Cleveland Indians. And maybe that's why Chief Blackwater surfaces here and says, where is all the wampum gone? Who knows? So I'm sorry, I don't mean to, it was a little bit of a fun thing. So lots of news today, and I wanted to really go over. First thing with the New York Times, there was a story about Oleg Deripaska and about how they're going to remove, the New York Times reporter was given some secret papers about the debt restructuring deal so that Oleg Deripaska's holding company, which is called EN Plus, can be reduced below 40 or 50% controlling interest. So the New York Times, I said it, you know, it's kind of like somebody who gets all the players right, but then doesn't know the game, right? What they did was they gave all of the chunk that would have Oleg Deripaska controlling Rusal, which is the largest aluminum company in the world, and also other interests as well, like Rostec and his energy interests in Glencore, which is the bad boy miner all over the world, South America and Africa, where we have all these things like Shinkolobwe and places like that where we have slave mining. And Peter Strzok, obviously not far away, seemingly in the action there with the mining activity in Africa. So what they did was basically gave a chunk, 30%, back to Victor Vekselberg's bank, Mr. Skolkova, which is called VTB Bank. I almost think of it as Victor's TNK Bank. It's based in Moscow. It's one of the bigger banks, but it's one of the kind of Mark Rich, Bill Browder behind the scenes bank, and then you've got Victor Vekselberg as the Russian. Remember, he's the head of the Skolkova, funnel for receiving secrets from the United States, and he is also named in the article. But again, New York Times gets the players right; they don't get the plays right. They don't understand that this is just a shuffle of the shares, and even Oleg Deripaska's wife gets some shares. So it's like, oh, he's not in control of those shares. It's kind of a ridiculous thing that Mnuchin's doing. It really makes you think, what is it? Thank you from Canada. Love Canada, just don't like the folks who want to bring back Canada as a province of Winston Churchill's world, 1900 world. And I do think sometimes we have that kind of empire thinking. So anyway, the key there is what the New York Times missed was that what you really have is Oleg Deripaska, like Saks Fifth Avenue, as I mentioned before, would set up one of these shops with nice plate glass in New York and Paris, or let's say you're Mangiante, working for Versace, right? Like she said she did. You would have this kind of storefront, right, with nice shop and so forth. You'd have it in Rome, Paris, London, and New York, and maybe Washington, D.C., and maybe Los Angeles or San Francisco, that type of thing. Obviously Toronto and, the jet set spots around the world. And isn't that what they did? Isn't that what the crime group did? The C-24 crime group, which became the Eurasian Crime Task Force. They have a bunch of kids that they recruit. The Russia kids would be Anna Chapman. You can think of them. They go to these hotel parties. Ask Charles Ortel if Anna Chapman would greet people at parties in her negligee. That's one of the favorite stories I have. We were right by my old office in Woolworth building when he told me that story, and told me and Jason that story. And that was kind of what they did. That's how compromise works. They work the diplomats coming into the UN building. The UN building is the target, right? That's why I always said Halima that I believe that she was in the same thing because she was being brought in by all these DNC people. But that's the idea, is you use these girls, they're underage, not her, but I'm talking about Oleg Deripaska. We talked about one gal here that was going in between New York, and I can't remember her name right now, but she was taking the Silver Streak ferry out to Newport, Rhode Island. And I'm going to forget her name right now, but then she ends up going to Florida and dying at 18 years old. But she was brought in kind of like as a 8-year-old, open bridge, and then a DNC kind of person involved in the financial markets. It's kind of the feeder system. It's like, hey, these are the athletes, and then we stage the compromise later on with these girls, and that's how it works. That's what it is. That's what the operation is. And then didn't they just move that to London with Christopher Steele and Bruce Orr? Didn't they just move that to Paris with Oleg Deripaska and Andy McCabe when they were trying to compromise the folks out in Shape in Mons, France, which is not too far. You can get there in an hour on the TGV, right? Didn't they do the same thing in Rome with Link University? Is it? Mangiante, my conversation with Mangiante ended abruptly when I asked one question. Do you know Mike Gaeta? Mike Gaeta is the person who worked in that Euro crime task force in New York until 2009, and then they sent him to Rome to set up a similar operation in Rome. And she gets this letter from John Schmitz, in 2008 saying, hey, she worked here as an intern, as a law clerk. She's a lawyer. This is her bona fides. Now she can, do meetings and so forth in Rome at Link University. Joseph Mifsud, European Parliament. She works directly for the president, who's at that time Italian. So all the pay to play going through European Parliament and NATO would have been in Rome. Okay, so she's right there in the right now. That's when the conversation ended. Do you know Mike Gaeta? To me, that's an easy question. No, or yes, I knew Mike Gaeta. Yeah, I was direct assistant to the head of European Parliament in 2009, who was Italian, and the base of operations was Rome. How would she not know? How would she not know Mike Gaeta, who's also based in Rome in 2009? Seems like a consanguinity of events all happening in 2009 when they established the Rome takedown office. Oleg Deripaska. I'm not saying Oleg Deripaska knows Maggiante, but I'm just saying that the financing for these covert takedown operations, very similar to what Peter Strzok did, again, in the Woolworth building that I used to work with in New York, that Charles was walking by when he told me about, Anna Chapman. That same building was the SEC enforcement building, right? Didn't they just move that takedown operation for SEC enforcement and then move it to Rome? Seems like what they did. Seems like Mifsud was that same person, and I can't remember that gal's name. That I did a show on it as well. If you Google George Webb and Oleg Deripaska, it'll talk about the girl who was from this city in New Jersey, right across, and she'd take the ferry over to New York, and then she was like way too dressed up, way too sexy, as way too young. She's on the ferry at like 14 by herself, and she's all dressed up like she's 28. And then she's taking the ferry on the Silver Streak all the way up to Newport. And her mother worked and lived in Newport. So the father was in New Jersey, and they were going up to Newport. Again, the DNC, Block Island, Martha's Vineyard. She was going to Martha's Vineyard, actually. Gosh, I can't remember her name right now. No, not Egg Harbor. It's Oyster Bay. So anyway, it'll come back to me. I'll remember. I did a show about it. But then she ends up dead as an 18-year-old in Florida. It seems to be that these crime gangs that Oleg Deripaska is putting in, I saw them in 90 in Prague. I saw them in Budapest in 91. They put them in Crimea. They put them all over the place in all these capital cities. And then it just seemed like in 92, 93, they move them into New York. They move them into Chicago. They move them into Florida. They move them into California and so forth. So anyway, so I that's why I say the New York Times might know Oleg Deripaska and the sanctions. There's interestingly, the Democrats are pushing, and 70 Republicans voted for it as well, to not remove the sanctions on Oleg Deripaska. I definitely agree with that. The Glencore, the person that he's involved with in Glencore, was this Israeli guy that was, it's just horrible Congo mining practices and so forth. Of course, the New York Times doesn't mention any of that, none of that. So they know the players, but they don't necessarily know the plays. I talked about Maggiante and Gaeta. Some of the other things, I go through a lot of the older videos because there was so much great research, and I try to use it as metadata for connecting the dots to what's happening currently. And when I saw Oleg Deripaska, I thought, he's been doing aluminum a long time, and whenever I hear aluminum, I think uranium, because it's kind of looks the same. It's powdery, etc. when it's in a yellow cake form or the bauxite form. And I thought of just this whole kind of turnover that happens in 1993 when Mueller kind of comes in, and Madeleine Albright comes into the White House, Hillary goes into the West Wing, etc. And that's the year that Project Sapphire happens. If you don't remember Project Sapphire, which I think is the beginning of Uranium One, Project Sapphire is moving 600 kilograms of HEU, highly enriched uranium. Remember, Oleg never downblends uranium. It's supposed to go to Piketon to be downblended eventually, right? 600 kilograms goes to Y12 storage location at Oak Ridge National Laboratories. How much actually made it? If you have, if Oleg Deripaska has Mark Rich as a partner, now Oleg Deripaska wasn't involved at this point, but if Mark Rich is moving that for you, then the people who move that are Peter Strzok, right, and Schmitz. These people, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. So they're the ones who are in charge of moving this. And the guy's name who moves it, who's in charge of moving it, I kid you not, his name is Dossier. His name is Dossier, the guy who moves the HEU from Kazakhstan to Oak Ridge National Laboratories. His name is Dossier. Now, this is why if Bob Mueller is this, at that time is the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General, he's already shut down Rocky Flats. He seems to be, shutting down that American industry and exfiltrating that centrifuge plant somewhere else. He's shutting down Fairnald in Ohio, near where I was going to school. There's some toxic release in 1984. I'm glad I wasn't there. I graduated in 82, but there's a toxic release. Isn't it one of the ways to shut down a plant to do a toxic release? And then not only do you get money for the cleanup, but then you can move the plant somewhere. If you have the Russians going into these places and doing these kind of industrial sabotages, you're the benefactor, right? When you exfiltrate the technology overseas to Iran as a proxy, or all the way to Ukraine as kind of almost an attached proxy to Russia. And that's where I think the business went. It went to either Georgia or Azerbaijan or Iran, or maybe even Kazakhstan as proxies, or it could have gone all the way back into Russia. That business, that uranium spinning business. But basically what's happening is the infrastructure for the uranium business is being dismantled by Bob Mueller. And it's being exfiltrated to proxies, Russian proxies. Now, I'm not the one who brought in Krylova and Bogacheva, and by the FBI's own words, say they did industrial espionage in Charles County, St. Charles Parish, in St. Charles County, in western Louisiana. Isn't that the precursor to, isn't it sound a lot like the Fairnald uranium cloud to you? After you get hit with a uranium cloud and it hits the newspapers, everybody wants to shut the plant down. That's an easy way, right? We had the same thing happen in Portland, Oregon for a glass shop where they said they put a whole bunch of metals in the air and they wanted to shut that down. That is the easiest form of industrial espionage. And again, these people seemingly are Cossacks. They're coming from this Dagestan area near Azerbaijan. They don't really have allegiance to the old Soviet Union. They seem to have this kind of very radical, violent Muslim thing. If you remember correctly, in Colony, New York, where there was a depleted uranium ammunition plant in 2006, same thing happens. There's a release. All of a sudden, there's news articles about all these people being poisoned. Now, and then we move a whole bunch of business, NATO business, in 2008, 2009. I think it's even earlier than that. The Colony, New York plant was shut down. Again, stalwart plant for making weapons up until that point, 2006. All of a sudden, it goes to Pakistani Ordnance Factory. That business goes to Pakistani Ordnance Factory. The limo driver, right, that ends up saying, "Oops, I killed the 20 people inside the limo," who's arrested. He's from that area. He's from Dagestan. He had all these quotes, and he had this Cossack on his social media site. And do you really think during Hillary's period, during being senator, going back and forth to Albany, talking to the senators and so forth. You think those limos weren't wired for sound? Absolutely, they were. Do you think they didn't get a couple of Olgas? Not Olgas, but I can't remember this gal's name that did the Silver Streak. Thank you very much, John. But it's kind of like they just exported these criminals from these areas and dropped them in to key areas where they wanted to do compromise. That seems to be the repeating pattern over and over. Okay, of these operations to move the uranium here to Y12. We've got Bob Otto in our story, the Russia Working Group. He's communicating not with his Gmail, Bob Otto's Gmail. He's not communicating with, the Brookings Institution and, the Nuclear Threat Initiative and the AEC and the IAEA and all these different regulatory bodies saying, hey, we've got to really watch how nuclear proliferation works. No, Bob Otto, again, on the board at Oak Ridge National Laboratories, is sending secret messages to the head of MI6, Andrew Wood, to the head of, a proxy of ACES intelligence in Australia, to Fiona Hill, who's already, who's the person, ripping stuff off Trump's desk in the White House, to the Annapolis group, which later becomes the Ohio Oberlin group, right? Where are you going to put all your Russian students that are coming in? Where are you going to put the Butinas? You have to have sponsors. You have to have coaches. You can't have teams without the coaches. If you have these 30 different people in this Russia working group label, they come in there, you'll sign their thing, saying, hey, this is the most, best graduate student I've ever had. They speak Russian. You speak Russian. That's the one thing that Bob Otto's working group had in common. And you bring them in, and then they leave with the secrets. Now, I'm not saying that I don't like international exchange. I do, but I just don't like surreptitious email. And remember, we also have him being involved in surreptitious email to Ann Yablonsky, who's fixated on Russian criminal figures, who also speaks Russian. Again, Robin Gritz thought this was really funny that Bob Otto would always come in and try to disrupt her meetings. Like, Bob, and then she said, you can't come to the meetings anymore. It's almost like a couple of the folks we used to have on the channel, right? And Ann Yablonsky, she was like, something very wrong going on there. He's married to a Russian agent. That's what, something to that effect. I don't want to attribute that to Robin, but she was very suspicious of this. But she never really connected the dots to Robert Levison, even though that they sent emails, secret emails to each other. Why are you sending each other secret emails, right? So I don't know if that's anyway. I'm just connecting Schenectady arsenic is not radioactive. Arsenic kills. Let's see. Learningologists in the past few days thought it was nuts last week. Yeah, if you look at the FBI, the one thing I've noticed is it's a family affair. They get the kids in the act, even if the kids are just going to sit at the Burger King and say, oh, that tall guy, he's leaving. I don't go to Burger King, but he's leaving now. Okay. Text, that you can do very simple stuff if you're involved in surveillance, right? And you don't want to spend $150,000 a year agent to see when the target leaves Burger King, right? Or, he's going into Congress right now. Okay. That sort of thing. So they do get people involved. So again, why the secrecy? If you're going to be the guy who takes down the president, why don't we know everything there is to know about what your dad did, right? Any kind of background check. If you're Mike McMahon with the FBI, when he was working for OPM, which is the Office of Personnel Management, that's the key for doing any kind of FBI background check. They do a complete deep dive. They did one on my brother when he got his top secret clearance. They went and talked to all these kids he knew in high school. They talked to a few people in junior high. They talked to my dad, I believe. I'm not sure if they talked to my dad actually now or not, but I know they ran background checks on whether he actually was who he said he was, my mom and the whole family. And a lot of times they'll send 7 agents out simultaneously to talk to the 2 parents and the 5 brothers all simultaneously. and write their story down and see if they all agree, see if they're all really related, right? So, but we don't know those facts for Bob Mueller. All we know is his dad dealt in precious metals. We don't have the records. We know he's related to Bissell in the defense industries. We know he's very tied in with John Brennan. We know a lot of the sources that he accepted and moved forward with, by their own admission, were disqualified as salacious and with no basis in fact. We know he's pushing ahead on the investigation in a secretive manner and seems to be targeting people for trivialities compared to what Hillary did. All the signs point to somebody trying to cover up their own crimes. So why not look into the Rocky Flats and find out what happened at Rocky Flats? Why not look into what happened at Fairnold? This is where coincidence becomes a pattern. If you look just at one instance, then you really don't have a deeper appreciation of the news. But if you look at, say, okay, well, you know, Bob Mueller shutting down Rocky Flats. They got a $12 billion cleanup as well. That's nice. Wonder who got that money. Battelle, maybe, or Bechtel. Then, oh, he shut down Fairnold as well. Huh, that's 2 for 2. Those are the first 2 things he does. Wow. And now when they get in power again, when Bob Mueller gets in power again, now they shut down Piketon. Were they involved in shutting down Colony? Was Bob Mueller involved in shutting down Colony? To me, it says he has inside knowledge of where the bones are buried. And he has that inside knowledge because his father was working in that business. His father was Navy Intel by their own admission, and then went to work for DuPont, a private corporation. DuPont is throughout this whole story, right? DuPont, for those who may have missed it, DuPont sees this opportunity. They're involved in, it's the key contractor that does the Manhattan Project. So we know DuPont was involved there. Might it be that, you know, the guy who, you know, Albert Einstein writes Franklin D. Roosevelt that letter saying atomic energy is going to be the most important thing in the world, and the Russians are doing or the Nazis are doing a heavy water plant in wherever, and we start. Isn't the whole Manhattan Project started on the letter from Albert Einstein to Franklin D. Roosevelt? Isn't that how the whole thing started? Wasn't Bob Mueller's dad in Princeton when that letter was written? Yes, Bob Mueller's dad was in Princeton when he wrote the letter. Somebody got it from Albert Einstein to FDR. Would DuPont be interested in that, running a super mega project like that, since they've been involved in weapons, every level of weapons since the War of 1812, actually all the way back to the Revolutionary War through the von Steuben, but we won't talk about that right now. But haven't they been involved in the American weapons business since the War of 1812? And wars all over the world. Wouldn't they want to be involved in the Manhattan Project? Wouldn't somebody in Princeton shepherd that letter to FDR to create the thing? Well, we know the beneficiary of it was DuPont. So somebody from DuPont was aware of the letter from Einstein to Roosevelt. Now you're done. We win the war. You explode the weapon. Does DuPont go, oh, hey, you know, that worked out pretty good? The biggest bomb ever. You know, look at us. We went from little, gunpowder charges in 1812 all the way up to atomic weapons. We better get out of this business. No. The next thing they thought, to go to Washington. Now, I'm not saying Rickover was a plant or anything like that. We need a guy to go to Washington to put this into nuclear submarines. We need to develop out the idea of a triad. We're in this Cold War with Russia. We need to develop missiles. Okay, so you need somebody who's a go-between for the Russian missile program, the Peenemünde V1, V2 rocket program. Right, so you've got that set up. That's, you know, with we've taken you to Fort Hunt. We have the Fort Hunt agreement that John's talked about. We got you your missile scientists. Good. Okay. Redstone Arsenal, Alabama, where we have Marshall Space Flight Center now, not far away, right, with NASA, which becomes NASA. So we took care of that. So, but the Russians have way more land and way more time zones than we do, right? And the quickest way for them, so we're completely almost, if you look at it from the real strategic situation, we're almost completely surrounded and them firing down on us. They have so much more space in the polar ice cap area, right? That's why we needed to partner with Canada. That's why NORAD was created, is so that we could get the Canadian forward positions for the missile silos, right? But the idea was developed out that we needed deterrence. We needed a bomber deterrence because we just didn't have the advantage with land, where the Russians had the advantage with land. So what did we do? We developed the B-29 bomber, and that was critical in dropping the bomb. And we have a book written by Lakova, the same group of Cambridge spying. These, when I say MI6, I love MI6. I just don't like the Cambridge spy group that came out of MI6. But this is the group that exfiltrates all the secrets to Russia by their own book. You can buy the book on February 2nd, and they've delayed it now since we've been talking about it. And they can tell you exactly how they create like an Oberlin group or an Annapolis group, starting at MIT. Who's on the board at MIT? It's Victor Vekselberg, same guy who's on the other side has these startups where the secrets go, which is Skolkova. So to me, the connection is the names have changed, but to me, it's still DuPont. To me, the names have changed, but it's still DuPont. So I'm just saying that then if you go through the history of the nuclear navy, you'll see that there was a need for these metals. You don't want the actual, you have the primary loop where you have the hot water going, right? You have to pressurize the water so it doesn't boil, right? So it's very hot. You can't have it leak because it's radioactive. So you have to have a strong metal, and then you have to have it so it doesn't stop the neutrons, going out and heating, right? I've thought that that's why the zirconium was the ideal metal. Well, there was no zirconium. So Bob, this guy here, all of a sudden goes into the metals market. Bob Mueller's dad, Tugwell, and Mueller, and creates this partnership with this company in Japan and Korea for this rare metal. That's where it was. It was a company called Huacheng, and I'm very familiar with it, down near Albany, where in Corvallis, where Oregon State is. And Bruce Orr's dad comes in as a promising scientist, and then Bruce Orr's dad is transferred to Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And then that person, again, Bob Mueller's dad brings Bruce Orr's dad, I believe, to Oak Ridge National Laboratories. And lo and behold, Bruce Orr is now the number 2 guy, really still number 3 guy at Department of Justice. I mean, they've said they've demoted him, but he's still there after all he's done. How could that possibly be unless Mueller was his angel on his wing? How could that be? How could Rosenstein still be there if Mueller wasn't there as a threat? There's just no way, right? So Huacheng, Teledyne Huacheng, W-A space C-H-A-N-G. That's where they got. You go back and read the archives. Again, it's all there. If you go back and read the archives, they went and got zirconium there. Now, people have said, you haven't done your research on hafnium. You haven't done your research on beryllium. You don't know that Bob Mueller's dad wasn't trying to do those 2 things as well. We've got time. Hafnium's not going anywhere. Beryllium's not going anywhere. There it is, Huacheng. But I'm just saying that looking into these things between Bissell and this connection between Bissell and DARPA and DuPont and Mueller is something that needs to be explored. Every time we turn over a rock, it produces something that's significant. Then you take the Russia connection, right? The DuPonts, okay, now remember, you got to think like a DuPont for a second. You've been blowing up stuff for a long time. You've been making bullets for a long time. It's your job to have agents all over the world knowing where the next war is going to be, because that's where your next sales are coming from. Okay. So now all of a sudden we invent the automobile and we start doing trucks. Where do you make your strategic investments? Right? Well, the DuPonts, and again, I know that how hard this is going to be for people to believe, especially if you're from Ohio. My dad's from Akron. My grandfather worked in Akron all of his life at Republic Steel. But the DuPonts wanted to get in on that because the world's armies travel on the tires. World's armies travel on the tires. So if I control the rubber supply, first they went to Savannah, Georgia, and then the Firestones had their plantation in Savannah, Georgia. Then they went to Vietnam because the rubber was there, right? Strategic resources is what I'm saying. The steel that came out of those plants that my grandfather worked in at Republic Steel were also very key to the Republic for making planes and so forth. And then aluminum comes along, changed everything, but tanks for sure still, etc. And, just car frames in general. And that's what Akron is all about, specialty steel versus, Pittsburgh being more rail line and Bessemer rail. But Akron, specialty steel, right? So Bob Mueller, again, I need specialty steel for this program. And what was made, what are all of the businesses that are involved with BWXT and my little excursion to Piketon, trying to meet the people there. We were talking about the shutdown there. I'm going to call it the Mueller shutdown. Where are they all from and what are they all doing? All the Babcock and Wilcox plants where I was born, Euclid, Ohio, over in Strongsville, over in, I can't remember the other plant is, I want to say Willard. But they're all involved in doing these Navy boilers for these primary loops and secondary loops for the Navy reactor. And they're all, BWXT comes in, which is Dick Cheney's company, and takes over and buys out all these companies. BW stood for Babcock and Wilcox. And then they added the XT, which is exfiltrating technology. And I'm sure they laugh about it. I'm sure, the FBI agent in Columbus, Pettyjohn, who owns a BW, who they moved BWXT to Lynchburg, Virginia. And all that technology kind of goes in the direction of Virginia. If you look at Bob, if you go back again and look at Bob Mueller's father, he ends up going to the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. If you look at the marriage records, that's where they are based, University of Virginia in Charlottesville, I think, right? And that's where the centrifuges are developed. When the Russians come back and they bring the guy who has the key technology, ZIPPE, when they bring him back, where do they take him? They take him to Charlottesville. And he's working on plans for 6 or 7 years and working from memory. The Russians didn't let him have the plans when he left. And then he goes back to Russia. Is that not a Bob Mueller agent? He brings the plans so that America can spend all the DARPA money developing all the centrifuges, and then he leaves. And isn't that exactly what happened? Didn't UVA and Oak Ridge National Laboratory spend $3 billion over a 10-year period to develop the centrifuges that were at Piketon that I was going to, American Centrifuge? You better believe it. If you talk to John Houston, who ran the project it was actually a 20-year period, that's exactly what happened. Wouldn't you then say, hey, the crops are grown? If you're Bob Mueller, wouldn't you say, hey, the crops are grown? Time to cut the 40-foot centrifuges down and harvest those suckers. That's how they think about it. They don't think about it, these people, they've been through everything. They've been handling plutonium in 1999 at the gas diffusion plant. They finally catch a break to do centrifuges. No, they're like, no, you people stay in the plutonium fouled place that we fouled. Work on these centrifuges, get this technology working, get the DOE loan, and then we'll exfiltrate it to Iran. Again, Bob Otto is on the board of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, not me. I'm not sending secret messages to Anya Blonsky in London. I'm not sending secret messages to Robert Levison in Kish Island. They are. Okay, so I'm just, and the fact that we've got two DuPonts in our story still today. We got Tom Firestone and I think Ron Firestone. Both are Russian-speaking lawyers, unlimited, close day, seemingly a patent lawyer, seemingly somebody who is expert at exfiltrating technology. He was kicked out of Russia for spying. That's usually a good clue. I wasn't kicked out of Russia for spying. Tom Firestone was kicked out of Russia for spying. And he's awfully close between his New York office and less than 60-mile drive out to Oyster Bay, where the Russian retreat is, where I say DuPont, remember who gave those two properties? DuPont's lawyer, Jacob Raskob, who, if you look at how close it is to the DuPont's, you could spend most of a lifetime trying to get off those two properties on the Brandywine, right? And NSA, thank you for NSA for taking me out there. And the DuPont gave the Maryland facility. Now, if you were exfiltrating a person at Navy Intel that was tapping Rickover's phone, and you made sure Rickover was doing all these updates and getting all these, if you go through he gets updates from the plants, 3 calls a week from all the plant managers, all the Navy Intel guys, plus a letter. He got letters from Navy captains for years. They had to write whatever was wrong with the program, whatever was wrong on their ship, for a handwritten personal note to Rickover for 20 years after they left the Navy program in Oak Ridge. Does that sound like you're trying to collect a whole list of anything that might be wrong so that you could forward that on to be perfected somewhere else? If you're Mueller intercepting that information and wiretapping that phone, you've got the folks out in Centerville right there. You've got the folks in New York right there, depending on what part of the facility we're talking about. I'm just saying that did Rickover have kids? Yes, Rickover's wife's alive. She was in the documentary, and Rickover's son was quoted in the documentary as well, and it was pretty funny. I think Rickover is a huge national hero, but I don't think that, and he was a constant workaholic, but I don't think that they realized his phone was tapped. If you're around Bob Mueller, what do we know about Bob Mueller? You can't wear a wire. I mean, hey, you've been in the lobby here at the FBI 8 minutes. Have we fitted you out for a wire yet to wherever you're going to? That's Mueller. I mean, he just, like everybody in this story, eventually it comes out that he was wearing a wire, right? So isn't that where Bob Mueller's career really starts? Again, DuPont gives the land. Why does DuPont give the land? DuPonts don't give away stuff. They gave the land in New York and they gave the land in Maryland so that they could exfiltrate and offshore